Okay, today we are here with Natalie Royston, and she's going to tell us about her music education experience. So you can go ahead.
All right, so I started at Ohio University, got a bachelor's in music education. I stayed at OU and got a master's in wind conducting and trombone performance. I then started teaching public school. My first job was in Belpre, Ohio. I taught 512 band. Stayed there for a couple years. Well, actually, my first job was part-time in Logan at the Logan Hawking schools. I did that part-time contract while I was in grad school. Then first full-time job was Belpre, and then I moved to Chillicothe, Ohio, where I was high school band director. Stayed there for a couple years, and then I transitioned to college. I moved to Abilene, Texas. Abilene Christian University. I was associate director of bands, low brass instructor, and music ed instructor.
Nice.
I taught there for about, I think I was there 6 years. And then I decided, since I wanted to stay in higher ed, I needed to do a doctorate. So I started my PhD in music education at University of North Texas, which then led me to leave ACU because I needed to do some full-time. I started part-time, then moved to Denton, Texas, where I finished my PhD or coursework. As I was finishing my coursework, I decided I needed a paycheck again. And I took the job at Iowa State University initially as associate director or assistant director of bands. And during my first year in Iowa, I was just basically band director. And I finished my dissertation, graduated in 2009. After I finished my dissertation, I stayed on at Iowa State as assistant director of bands. And then the next year, due to a resignation, I moved up to associate director of bands. And then a year later, our full-time music ed person left. And so I moved across to the tenure track music ed position.
Awesome.
So that's kind of the path that led me to where I am. And now I've been in this position since 2012. I started out doing all the teacher prep for all of our students, and now there are 2.5 music ed faculty, so I get to share the duty.
Great. So how have you liked teaching music ed students?
Most of the time I really like it. The only challenges that come up are usually driven by the politics.
Yes.
Licensure, politicians, laws have created some bumps along the way.
Yes.
But I still believe in what we do, and it's problem solving and finding ways along the way.
Yes. Yeah. And do you still get to work with the bands at all?
Sometimes. I've flown in and out. I still do judging for high school solo ensemble and large group festivals and marching band. I don't work full time with any of the bands. I'll step in if someone goes on leave, or when we have random stuff, I'll step in and fill in for a semester. Otherwise, it's more just kind of hit or miss.
Yeah.
But I do a lot with the high school bands. I go out and clinic middle school bands and high school bands. I do a lot of clinicking with middle school.
That's amazing.
A lot of the other, a lot of my colleagues just like working with high school. So I like to make myself available to middle school.
That's really good though for them to have someone from higher ed to come down and work with them. And I know
it's fun.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. That's awesome.
It's fun, and it reminds me of why I do what I do. And
yes, that's so amazing. It's good to have kind of that inspiration and be like, okay. And it's good to have that public education experience, and you're used to working with those ages anyway.
And it keeps me grounded and keeps me realizing, keeps me aware of trends, and kids change over time and schools change a lot, and
yes,
it just gives me time in the classroom to talk to the kids and the teachers and just still be a part of it.
That's really cool. So how do you like Iowa compared to Ohio and Texas?
It's different. Politically, it's been more challenging. But all three of those states, ironically, right now, I think would be facing some of the same challenges.
Yeah.
I just think there's a little bit more of a power surge by the politicians right now in Iowa because it's a smaller state.
Yeah.
A much less populated state. Population wise, it's a little more like Texas, where we have a lot of rural. Unlike Ohio and Texas, we don't have a great deal of poverty. It's a very middle class state. It's a very white state. We don't have the big cities like Ohio and Texas. It's Des Moines, our biggest city, and it's not really. It's probably not much bigger than like Dayton.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's much smaller than the 3 big cities in Ohio.
That's very.
But it's a nice, safe place.
Yeah.
They once valued education. Iowa was a long time #1 in education in the nation. They were once the leaders in music education. NAFME started in Iowa.
Wow. I didn't know that. That's
our
cool.
Yeah, but our current political system, without getting too political, it's very, our governor is very much a Trump lover and in that line, and isn't necessarily as pro public education. So we've had a lot of battles with financing and pushes for private schooling and things that have adversely affected the schools in the state.
Yes.
But hopefully this is a temporary trend that they can rebound from. But it is a very white, middle class state. I think 98% white is the last stat I saw. We are the whitest state in the country.
Wow. That's crazy. So kind of what got you into music ed? So what, like, what was your inspirations? How did you, decide to do this?
Originally, it was because there was just some point in high school where, you're kind of trying to decide what you want to do and thinking about what can I not do without.
Yes.
And band and playing my instrument had just become such a big part of my life. And like many others, the band room was the place I belonged. It's so hard in high school sometimes to find your place, and the band room was the safe place. I thought a lot of my high school band director, and it just kind of felt like what I was supposed to do.
Yes.
And I just couldn't really see myself doing anything else.
That's really cool. I think that's how a lot of people feel too, that safe environment. And again, what can you do without, and what can't you do without? And then on the flip side of that, what kind of got you into doing higher ed? Like, what was the push for that and your inspirations there?
That was an unexpected path. I had never actually had envisioned myself doing this. It was actually through my time at Ohio. As I was finishing my undergrad, it was actually at a point where the job market was very competitive and very few jobs were available. It was in the mid 90s. And job market was so different than now. And it was really hard to get a job. And I was kind of trying to be a little bit selective of where I went. And as my student teaching was coming to an end, going into student teaching, I wasn't 100% sure I wanted to teach. I was very much thinking about doing a performance master's and trying to become more of a performer. But then when I started student teaching, I really, really loved it. And so kind of mind switched and jumped into the job market, but really didn't find a job in that first bit. And I graduated, we were on quarters then, so I didn't graduate till well into June. And then by then I was starting to really kind of consider, what do I do next?
Yeah.
And so I had originally taught and put in an application to do grad school the next year, and then I'd kind of revoked it, and then I went back and asked them, can I change my mind again? So I kind of went into my master's because I didn't get a job.
Yeah.
And so I started as a trombone performance major. My teacher was Reginald Fink, who was the trombone teacher at the time, and Bob Smith was the euphonium teacher at the time. So I studied with both of those men.
Awesome.
And then my second year of grad school, Well, during grad school, faculty started to change. I was trying to think. My first year of grad school, John Cliver came as director of bands. And that changed just kind of big picture thinking. And then it was either my second or third year, Ricky Sook came as the marching band director. And so gradually they were starting the wind conducting degree, and that hadn't existed before. So I decided at first I was going to switch my major from trombone to wind conducting, but then I was so close, I realized that I could finish both of them and just have both masters. And so at that point, I finished both of those degrees and then got my job at Belpre. And it was perfect. And that's what I wanted to do, was teach high school. And then I jumped from Belpre to Chillicothe just for a bigger school. And then just kind of some of the frustrations of, teaching and rethinking and such, and some pressure from having been, when conducting. I'd been to CBDNA conferences and such. I would always kind of watch jobs that were out there and look at things that were posted. And I guess just for curiosity, I started watching some of the collegiate jobs, and then one posted in West Texas at Abilene that was just like written for me. Because it was band, it was low brass studio, it was music ed, it was conducting pit orchestras for musicals. I mean, it was just like everything.
You're like, that's me.
Yeah, they needed a drill writer, and I'd always written my own drill. I mean, it was just like exactly a perfect fit. So I sent my application in, not thinking I would actually even get looked at, and I got the job.
Wow.
And then from there, I thought about going back and forth, but then once I was at ACU for a while, I realized that's what I wanted to stay in, was teacher ed. So that prompted going on for the doctorate and such.
That's a really cool experience. I think, some of the people I've, talked to, or people I know that are in higher ed, have kind of the same perspective, where they weren't planning on it and it just kind of fell in their lap. So that's really cool. And it's awesome. You get to teach music educators and, see them through and, do your thing in Iowa, not Ohio, my brain.
Yeah.
I think it cut out first.
Because I was still single, so I had the option of jumping and moving. I was single. I did take a pay cut going from public school to higher ed. I was young enough at the time I could absorb that without much trouble. I didn't own a house. So it just made it easier. I don't know, once I was older, and especially once there's family obligations and such, I don't know I could have made that transition. But it was just, everything fell in place at the right time. And
that's awesome. Just worked out for you. So another question I have is kind of what inspires you as a music educator and what keeps you going?
What keeps me going? What inspires me? Over time, I think the music and the experience of the ensemble is what drew me in. But I think over time, I really learned that it's so much more about the relationships than it is that it's individuals and the students and the relationships that inspire me and keep me going. It's about helping my students become the best teachers they can be, and trying to ease their pathway. Because I think back to like my first year of teaching was, everyone's first year of teaching is hard. But what can I do to make theirs as successful as possible? What can I do to set them up to be successful teachers? What do I wish I would have known? And, trying to maintain our foothold in the schools. We don't want to lose music education, and, teaching the accuracy and the whys as well as the whats.
I love that. The relationship.
And right now, I think we're a huge mental health and well-being piece of education.
I agree. And then, what advice or encouragement do you have for future music educators? I know you teach them, so you probably have a lot of great words of advice that you give. So maybe what are some of your best things that you would tell a music educator?
Relationships first.
Mm-hmm.
If students aren't feeling safe, the band room, the music room has to be a safe space. Students have to be willing to or able to come in and feel safe, take risks, be vulnerable, trust the people around them, work as a community. And secondly, flexibility. We have to keep in mind that society, schools, everything are changing. And so sometimes as music teachers and even band directors, we have to be open-minded as to what we do and make sure we don't get so stuck in tradition that we make our profession no longer or our content no longer relevant to our students. Mm-hmm. I think we're fighting a battle right now across the country with diminished enrollments. And I think we need to consider somewhat what we're doing to make sure tradition doesn't force us into extinction.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree with that. I think
so. I'd say those are the biggest ones are relationships and flexibility.
I love those. I think those are fantastic words of advice. And then to end, what is one of your favorite memories that you've had as a music educator?
As an educator?
Well, it could be, educator, anything at teaching in higher or, high schools, whatever you think is one of your best memories.
Wow, the list is so long.
You could say a few.
That's a really hard one. Especially because I've taught now since my first job. I got my first job in 1997. Wow. So except for 1 year off for grad school, I've taught straight through. I'll just kind of jump through a few, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
My first year teaching, when I took Belpre to state marching contest, they hadn't been there like a long, long time. Mm-hmm. And we got a 1 at contest. And the joy those kids exuded was just incredible.
That's amazing.
Some of the trips, I took Belpre to Chicago. I took Chillicothe to Florida. Mm-hmm. Some of those students had never been out of the state. A few had never been out of the county before they got to high school. I don't know, providing them new experiences, providing them those safe spaces. As a college director, I don't know, it seems to be wrapped around the moments where the students were the happiest. Mm-hmm. A lot of trips, performances, individual students. When I taught private studio, it was off.
There you are. Hello.
Are you there?
Yep, I'm back now. I think we're back. I just heard you talking about when you were teaching private studio. That's the last thing I heard.
Yeah, private studio, their recitals were always a huge moment. Mm-hmm. I had a student win at international competition.
Wow.
Their graduations were always huge.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think we're back again.
All right, I'm going to move to another room.
Okay.
I'm wondering if it's my Wi-Fi. So I'm traveling through the house.
I'm right beside my modem because I was like, I'm not going to trust it.
Their graduations and when they get their first jobs. Mm-hmm. That's probably the biggest in my current job.
Yeah.
I love when they contact me and tell me they've gotten their job.
That's amazing.
That's probably the best part of my current job is I love to go out and watch and work with student teachers, but getting them to both graduation. We do a courting ceremony for music or for education graduates, so they get a cord for being an educator. But getting them to graduation and the joy they have when they get that first job.
That's amazing.
That's the best part.
I love those. I love all of those memories. I feel like even this was my first year teaching last year. So even within 1 year, I had so many, fun memories. And so to think, all the years of education, all the places you've been, I'm sure countless memories.
And know that this first year, those memories will always be some of the strongest, and those students will stick with you like no other you'll ever have.
Yeah.
I'm Facebook friends and such with a whole bunch of my very first students. And it's amazing. That group will be more special to you than any that ever follow.
That's awesome. I already kind of sensed that during this first year, kind of, at the end, I was like, my seniors were leaving. I'm like, no, I just met you.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. I loved hearing about your journey and all of your advice and everything. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
If you need, feel free to reach out. For anything, be happy to help.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day.
Good luck with your research.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye. You too. Thank you.